I'm going to go through some of the basics of pencils and how to use them and the different varieties and what you may have at home and what you may not. So first off is the good old-fashioned yellow number 2 pencil. Completely perfect to use. The erasers on these go pretty quick and some of them are pretty crummy. If you have erasers at home, you will probably need them. The pink eraser that we all know and don't really love is perfectly fine for your usage if you need to. If you have a pencil set that you bought and it has all these different numbers on them, I'm going to go through what those numbers mean and how to use them. If you do have these pencils at home, they have little numbers on the sides of them. These little numbers indicate how hard or soft the pencils are. HB is a half and half blend of clay and graphite. For those of you who have larger kits that have H, B, and F pencils, they are very similar to the HB. So if you look at the pencils like a positive negative scale in math, the H side is the harder side, whereas B is the softer side. The pencils have a rating of 1 through up to 13. I recommend is an 8H if you really want to go super light. If you want to go on the soft side, I actually recommend ebony. Ebonies have an oil in them along with the graphite and clay, which makes it blend very nicely and it is super dark. An ebony is roughly equivalent to an 8B pencil. This is a 6H, which is on the harder side. So when we draw with that, it's going to be very light. If you press too hard, it's going to scratch your paper. This is used for initial work to sketch out what you're going to do. It's not used really for shading. It's just to rough out your image, which makes it super easy to erase later. A 4H is what I prefer to rough out or to do my initial drawings. A 2H is still on the harder side, but it's getting more towards the center. It's not going to be super light. It's still going to be able to write and you won't get as much scratching. Like I mentioned before, the HB is right around the middle. It's a 50-50 blend of clay and graphite. The 2B is the standard pencil that most Americans use. The yellow number 2 pencil is the exact same as a 2B pencil. Since 2B is on the softer side, it leaves a darker mark and does not scratch much at all. The 4B is on the softer side, so it's going to leave an even darker mark. Many people use a 6B or even softer lead. I prefer to switch over to the ebony pencil. It has the oil in it, which allows it to be very smooth when you're blending. So the ebony pencil is what I use for shadows and blacks. You can see the difference between the pencil leads as they go from the hard to the softer leads. The harder is lighter and it scratches more. The softer are darker and they do not scratch your paper at all. So a short history of the pencil. So pencils were originally developed when workers were going into mines or into forests and they needed something to record the information that they were producing. So originally pencils were made of lead, and they found out over time that people were getting sick. So eventually they realized that lead is toxic, and if you are exposed to too much lead, it'll give you lead poisoning. There were 2 inventors who came from a woodworking factory, and they were recognizing that lead was getting people sick. So they tried to figure out another way to compensate and still have a writing utensil, but not kill people. So the 2 guys' names were Buddha-Hovig and Hartmuth. These 2 worked together and they came up with this idea of combining clay and graphite together. The first person credited with mixing graphite and clay together was Nicolas Jacques Conte. And you've probably used Conte crayons or Conte pencils in your time. That's where the name comes from. Graphite is a very soft material. So when they tried using graphite originally, it would just disintegrate, it would break off, it would become a mess. So Buddha-Hovig and Hartmuth started mixing different amounts of graphite and clay together. They realized that if you mixed more clay, it would make the pencils harder, but would leave a very light line. Whereas if you mixed more graphite and less clay, then it would have a darker line, but wear down much quicker. When most people think of adding darkness to a piece of paper, they refer to it as shading. But oftentimes people will call the lightness and the darkness, or the different levels of darkness that is added to a paper, as shading, which is not exactly true. The original word for shading as we know it today is called notan. The word notan is a Japanese term that literally means light-dark harmony, how light reacts to objects. Do more and do better.